Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. As always, my name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. Today with me is Yiannis, the CEO of Covve, and we'll talk about Covve in a bit. But before talking about Covve, let's talk about remote work. And what do you see as the future of remote work, Yiannis? Tell me a little bit more about your vision.
Hi, Gleb. Yes, of course. Yeah, remote working. Well, we've seen a big change. I'm not going to speak that much about the change, but it was indeed the catalyst. So remote working is something that existed in the past. In the US, it accounted for like 5% of people were working from home. And in Europe, that was 6%. Now that jumped drastically during the pandemic. And of course that, because we had to. And the good thing is that technology came to assist us in that. And this is what creates now an environment that supports remote working. So technology came in with Zoom, like we're doing now, and Hopin, and all these tools to encourage it. And then remote work jumped to like threefold in the US, fourfold in Europe. And it's interesting because you ask me about the future, and I see that it did make us rethink our priorities. It did force many people in my company as well to rethink about work-life balance, see how they can actually adapt their work to fit their life better, since remote working was now not only more facilitated through tech, but also more accepted by the employers. And now we're shifting out of the pandemic, of course, to this new norm, which accepts remote work, but also we see that it has in many cases had a negative effect, a negative impact. Like in our case, we had people that were going through demotivation, although efficiency was up. And we realized that we couldn't identify the smaller hints that you see when you're facilitating, like when you're working in a workplace. And the interactions that, of course, enforce creativity. So we lost a lot of that. So I see both our company, but also I see the future of remote working being a hybrid model where we try to have a lot of physical interactions on one end. We use remote working with some tricks that we learned along the way that would facilitate interactions that are more social and that they don't necessarily have to do with a specific agenda that you connect for, in order to create a model where we can work remotely in a more hybrid way. So that's what I see as the new remote working environment. And if you allow me, I don't want to go on for ages, but if you allow me, we are seeing a transition back to the office, of course, not to the extent that we had before. So in the US, it's gone down now, I believe like 12%. In Europe, it's gone down to 9% remote working. So still bigger than it was, but people are creating this hybrid situation.
Now, I have 21 companies figured out the transition to hybrid work, remote work, whatever, future permanent work arrangements that they figured out. And one of the biggest challenges with hybrid work and remote work is the weakening of connections. Now, when we do surveys within my clients, we're seeing that people are more productive overall when they spend time working remotely. They feel better well-being, they feel less stressed, they feel happier. But the biggest challenge that they experience is the loss of connections, not within their own team, actually maybe better connected to people in their own team, but they have worse connections to others in their own company or outside their company. So this weakening of connections. Tell me what you've observed in terms of the sense of people's connections to each other.
Yes, especially in the beginning when we start, and what we see also in the industry, so it's reflected. We speak with many company owners and other fellow employees, colleagues. We see indeed what you describe. So we stopped having like random interactions. We stopped having when the remote work really accelerated. We stopped having events, of course, and all these interactions in the office. So it did hurt networking, as you say, and connections and social interactions, and then people adapted. And then we created, like in our company, we created these coffee sessions forced on Zoom, still without agenda. So to create some interactions that are not necessarily facilitated. We created gaming nights where we do gaming, where we actually get to experience emotions and states that are not your polished situation that you have in the office. We take every excuse to have physical interactions. So we, for example, I'll give you an example. We took a challenge to facilitate networking at a 5,000 people event, to be the people facilitating it as networking experts. And we used a combination of our products to create NFC contactless badges to exchange details. And then we actually gamified it, having live stats on screens on people connecting and which countries were connecting and which industries were connecting, and also creating a currency out of that. So you could go to the bar and get a gin and tonic or a lemonade using your connections as currency. So facilitating this gamification and to do this, we brought the whole team together to do it, like both engineers and creatives, and so to give a sense of presence. So we take every opportunity to facilitate that. Now that's in our company, on our premise, which is networking. Both our products and our education is around making it a habit of staying in touch. So as these interactions have, as you said, have come away from us, as this randomness has come away, there is a much bigger need for a system, for a habit of staying in touch and making sure that you're reaching out, even if there's no specific 100% agenda to other people. And of course, that does not factor in the randomness that we had before, but it does encourage connections and referrals and introductions. So you both manage, but also facilitate the growth of that contact network.
Excellent. Now, tell me a little bit about the nature more of your expertise. What does your company do exactly? What are the products you offer so that our audience understands where you're coming from when you speak about networking and connections?
Yes. So our vision is to help people build meaningful relationships. That's the vision of our company. And we do this through education and products. Our main product is a system, a platform that is served through a mobile app called Covve Personal CRM. And what it does is it helps you make it a habit of reaching out to people. So it's going to remind you to reach out to your connections. It's going to give you the excuse. So for example, news affecting their industry and their sports team maybe, but it also puts you in a workflow where you have to listen. So a workflow where you have to take notes on what the priorities are. Maybe it's their family, maybe it's their career. If it's their family, who's their family? So put you in this workflow of listening instead of just transactionally speaking, listening, absorbing, and then offering back information at first, because that's what we want to encourage. The building of interactions to build reciprocity and trust, and then of course referrals and knowledge exchange. So in simple terms, it creates a people-centric approach to put reminders and notes and make it a habit of reaching out to people every week. So it's like a habit meets productivity meets contacts app. Now that's our main product as a company, because we have the vision that I described before, helping people stay in touch. We have other products that have to do with the relationship. Like, for example, we offer digitization of business cards, both paper scanning. We have the most accurate scanning solution for scanning business cards in more than 30 languages, but also digital business cards, because that's the beginning of the relationship. Like the event I mentioned. So again, we take projects where we can really facilitate the networking of many people and then put them in a workflow to not leave it on the first relationship, but actually follow up and try and build a connection and build an interaction. And then we have also an education side that does research. Like for now, we do a lot of research on the metaverse and how that could facilitate networking. And we have an online email first course that has a lot of it. It's a 25-week course on how to build your networking skills and make it a habit of keeping in touch and building relationships rather than doing transactional networking on just what you need.
So is the product, the personal CRM, it seems like it's primarily B2C. Do you offer B2B options, or is this just a B2C opportunity?
So it's business to professional. So our users, as you say, just download it from the App Store and use it. But our users are mainly entrepreneurs. But we also have people in very big companies like very big banks. So it's interesting. It's entrepreneurs. Then it's executives in big organizations. And then we have, like, of course, real estate brokers, MBAs. So it's a B2C product, but most of our audience base is working in big companies. So we don't sell to companies, except our digital card solution. That's sold to very big companies across the world, mainly in the US, but across the world. And then, of course, many of them use our personal CRM, but we do not sell it to a company. We sell it to the individual professional.
Excellent. Thank you for the context. Now, thinking about with the products that you offer, you are quite aware of how people are networking in the modern day and age. So when you're thinking about the networking, how should people who are trying to build an all-remote career, there's a pretty large proportion of the people who want an all-remote career now, and especially working professionals who are higher earners, of course, they have many more remote opportunities than many others. And sounds like that's the kind of professionals that you are serving. So when somebody is thinking about building an all-remote career, how should they be networking differently than someone who wants to spend at least some time in the office with a hybrid career or all of their time in the office?
Yes, that's a deep question. I think there are two aspects to it. One is actually the ability to create a career path that aligns with what your priorities are, and I think that's, as you said, like the priority could be remote. It could also have to do with the time that you spend at work. Like there are people that. Especially after the pandemic, everyone has rewired themselves to actually understand what do they aspire to have through their career. It's not the straight career ladder that we had up to now, where you just had to go up in your career. It's more of what do you want out of your life and work, and what do you want out of the career. The reason I'm saying this, Gleb, is the fact that I think it's of paramount importance to understand what you want, and then to get that job opportunity and that progression in the career, you have to expose yourself and be top of mind to people both within your organization, so colleagues. So you would need to do knowledge share and make sure that you build trust and rapport. And since you're remote, you will need many more. You will need to be much more proactive about it than you would in the office, that you're going to bump into them. Yeah. So you need to have a system in place to keep in touch with the people that you trust and you want to build rapport with, or the people you aspire to know. You need to build a system that reminds you to stay in touch. You stay in touch, you exchange knowledge. There has to be reciprocity, so you're top of mind for your section, and I'm arguing both within the organization that you're working remotely, but also within your industry. Because if, again, looking at career aspiration, you would want to be top of mind when there's a referral, or when there's a headhunting opportunity, you would want to be top of mind. So that's one side. And the other side I want to mention is, in order to progress well in that career, you need to really understand the next step. So if you do build trust, whereas we had this in the office much more easy, it was much easier. Now you need to build trust to speak with the people that have the next potential opportunity, whether it's within or outside the organization, to understand what their job entails. So that has a level of trust to really understand the pros and cons of that job. You need to build rapport, understand it from the inside of the other person. So that's a knowledge exchange that has to do with trust, to understand whether then it aligns with your real interest, as I said before, and whether it fits that progression that you aspire to hit. So I think it's both being top of mind, your personal brand and your exposure in the company, as well as your understanding and knowledge of where do you want to actually be within that career.
Now, I want to circle back to something that I think very important that you said about building trust. And when someone is working remotely, prior to the pandemic, it probably would have been seen as very difficult, if not impossible, to build a full, deep level of trust when someone is fully remote. That appears like it's shifting. So when you are networking in a remote manner, what are the best techniques and approaches to build up trust?
I think very importantly, you have to be open to allow, because the reason, going back to the problem, as you said, I mean, we're adapting to the new norm. The problem is the fact that going into a scheduled meeting over a camera, first of all, you lose a lot of the interaction. I mean, a lot of the talk cannot take place with the same effect and efficiency that you can do face to face. If it's a negotiation, a difficult, a sensitive discussion, of course, the eye contact is really bad. And
sure.
But that aside, we're getting a bit used to it. But very importantly, and maybe it's never going to reach. I mean, that's a huge debate, and that's why I mentioned the metaverse. And VR. It's a huge debate whether we will be able to bring closer the physical and the eye contact and the expressions. But the other big problem that we are tackling, so this is a problem that I don't know how well we will tackle. I have some opinions, but they're still being formed. The other problem, though, is the fact that when we go in a scheduled meeting, in a scheduled call, we are very much prepared to expose ourselves to that specific interaction. And I think the techniques, as you mentioned, would be to actually negate that, to open up, because trust has to do with finding common points. Like now we're having a discussion over an interview. It's harder for me to actually go and ask you about your family and your sports and your life so to find common situations to build trust. So I think it's really important, if you're working remotely, to open up and throw in the conversation the fact that, for example, I've got 3 kids and a wife, and that's a very much part of my life. And I think opening up in this sense opens up the other persons as well. It removes some of the defense of the formality of that conversation and opening a more casual discussion. In that sense, though, it opens also the opportunity to relate. It opens the opportunity to explore what common experiences you might have, what common frustrations, common pain points, common priorities. We opened the discussion and you said you like gardening. That wasn't a common point for us, but that's an opening that allows an exploratory discussion on the common point. So I think a very, very strong advice is to open up and then listen in, take in. Ideally, take notes, because especially if it's a discussion that is early on in that conversation, so the trust is not there yet, those common points have to be remembered. They have to be, and then they have to be maybe brought back, or even if I'm not into gardening, maybe I want to put a note to see what's happening in gardening, to actually go back to it. I'll quote a user of us who is a very high executive in a very, very prestigious bank. I don't need to name, he's a private banker. And he mentioned that he does 42 touch points with his clients every year. He's a big user of our system. But he said that actually a very important point for a client of mine is a health condition with his wife that I am actively monitoring, because I care and I need to show that I care and I need to connect with that person on that matter. So I think it's opening, which will allow more to be shared, listening, a recording, and then making sure you have a system to connect again and again until you build that trust and rapport. And of course, the last thing I'm going to mention here that's very important is giving. And when I say giving, it could be in the form of knowledge. So it could be in the form of sharing know-how. It could be in the form of, if you are actively listening, as I said before, then you will hear needs. And then you could serve those needs either with knowledge you might have or ideally with connections that you have that could help with that specific situation that was shared. And if you do offer the connection, what happens, and this is the beauty of networking, I think, and this is the essence, is that you're bringing two people together. Now that ticks a few boxes. It creates a reference points on you if that connection is successful. You wouldn't do it unless you want to do it. You believe it's going to be fruitful. If it's fruitful, it creates a giving gesture by you to two individuals, not just one, by the way, who in turn, most of the times, reciprocate with a connection to you. And that creates a loop that grows your network while at the same time building trust and rapport, because then when you speak again with Gleb, you'll say, yeah, and how did it go with John? And you can say, yeah, John, we've been very, very close since then. And that creates a loop that allows you both to nurture, but also to grow the network.
Excellent. Great. Well, those are the questions I had. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audience that you haven't yet discussed about remote work, about networking, about Covve that we have not yet touched upon?
No, I think we've covered most of the things I wanted to express. One thing is that I'd like to share the fact that we started very recently working with a lot of our users. Like, for example, I'll mention Doug Lester. He's a career coach and he advises leading business schools in the US on advising MBAs on how to excel in their careers, as well as FTSE 100 executives. Now, the reason I mentioned Doug is that we started collaborating with Doug on sharing know-how on why it's very valuable to build meaningful relationships, how to build a habit of doing so. And we're doing it now as well with Sharon Stewart. She's leading a female entrepreneur network of more than 3,000 female entrepreneurs in Nashville. Different approach, female entrepreneurs starting up. Again, same problem statement, like same idea of how do you create a habit of doing this. And the reason I'm saying this is because we're very keen to meet people from different professions. So this is like an invite for anyone to reach out to understand the specific needs within their job of actually building a meaningful network and what they're doing about it and what habits they're doing and how we can help facilitate their situation.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise, Yiannis. That was very helpful.
Thank you very much, Gleb.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you checked us out and leave a review. It really helps us improve the show to know what we can do better and what we're doing well, and it helps other people discover the show. And please make sure to recommend our show to your family and friends. All right, everyone, I'll see you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.